Hello there, welcome back to our show. Today I'm going to talk about the New World Terrence Malick film. Here we go. This is the Criterion version. Now you can get this in Britain or you can get it in America. You used to only get it in America, that's why I've got the American version. But then they released it in Britain afterwards, so then so they feel kind of stupid. But here it is, it's a lovely version. Look at this, and you get a booklet and you get 3 different cuts of the film. Now, I will cover the different cuts. And what's the difference? Because essentially, they are different cuts, there are different interpretations, but the story remains the same. It's not like Malick's offering you like a radically different film each time. He's offering you basically the same film, but with different layers of depth to them, or because in one case it's more simple, one case it's a bit more structured, in one case it's a bit more expansive. So it's still essentially the same story, but it's like reading different drafts of it, and you can choose which one you like the best. My favourite of the 3 is actually the first cut, which was the film that Malick edited. It was going to be, it was 2.5 hours. It was meant to get released. It's one that went out to the critics, and then Malick cut it down a little bit for the distributors. I think you lost 10-15 minutes. And the version that's released is still wonderful. It is a wonderful film. It's a bit more... the theatrical cut that was released is a bit more mysterious. It's less spelled out than the first cut. First cut's a bit more traditional. And then the expanded cut, originally it was meant to just be like, okay, go back to the first cut, show what the first cut was, and then Malick decided to actually, he had some things he wanted to try out with this other cut as well, so he created another cut that was about 3 hours long, that was a bit more expansive. I don't like that cut as much. I think it's a really good film, but I think there's, it loses some bits of simplicity that the earlier cuts had. Just directness about the situation, and sometimes it just wanders off to things that are interesting, but they feel like you're seeing deleted scenes that were deleted for a reason. So while I enjoy that cut, I'm much more likely to go to the theatrical cut or the first cut for rewatches, because I just like them better. You know, other people prefer the extended cut, so it's just like, it's whatever your taste is, really. So those are the 3 cuts. I mean, you are getting a very similar film. But the film itself is the story of Pocahontas, done very different from how Disney did it. Disney did it in a very kind of Disney-ish way. I never managed to sit through the whole film. I was so bored. But the New World is something wonderful. The New World looks at the arrival of the settlers. This is the first settlers who are engaging with the local Indians, as they call them, because they thought they were going to India. The original idea was to go to India. When Columbus did it, so that's when they realised there was another continent there. They still called them Indians, even though they weren't Indians. That's why we came out Indians, because people were stupid. They were just the indigenous culture there. So this is the first time people have gone over there to actually see what they can do and see what they can make of the land. Since it's a whole new land, and they're coming from Europe, which is having centuries of religious wars, of territorial wars for different kings and different religious interests. And you've had the Crusades, and you've had all this turmoil. You've had the churches reforming to go from just being a Catholic church to being a Catholic church with Protestants who are, and then those two sides are fighting. So you had all that stuff in the previous century, and now they're going westward and seeing what they can find. So this is the first settlers, really, and they're led by Christopher Plummer, who appears then disappears. He gets them over to the land, and then goes back with a ship to get more supplies. They didn't think they were going to make it. There were almost mutinies by the time they were reaching the land. And Colin Farrell's John Smith is in the brig when they arrive. And he's basically he's been in the break for saying things that Plummer character didn't like let's go back, this is not working, we need to run out of food, things like that. But he was a soldier, so they realise we kind of need his skills. He actually knows how to fight. He knows practicalities that some of these sailors don't know. Some of them are just sailors, that's all they know. So, when Plummer goes back, they do have leaders, but Smith is just like one of the many. So he's sent out in a trip to scout the local area. And he gets caught by the indigenous population. I'm not going to call them Indians from now on because it's like, it feels kind of insulting. And essentially they capture him. They're originally going to kill him, but they decide to actually try and... Pocahontas actually sees him as a human being, so she convinces her father, who's a tribe, the guy in charge, to talk to him and try and find out more about him and more about the culture. And slowly he starts to get into this culture and starts to be friendly with the people, the indigenous population, seeing their good side and seeing what they have to offer. That it's actually a very healthy civilization on its own. It doesn't really need the Europeans to tell it what to be. It's fine. It's got its own way of doing things. But he also knows what the European culture is. And when he eventually has to go back and to become the negotiator between both sides, he realizes that this isn't going to work. This is not going to work. By the time he gets back, the people inside the fort, they built a fort, and they are starving basically because they haven't really grown enough food for themselves. They're basically, the people there aren't really good at survival techniques, or good at farming and building and getting crops and making sure you've got enough food to survive. They just don't have those skills or that knowledge. They're military based that build a fort to protect yourself rather than deal with the population, create a kind of to and fro the population so that you're not going to fight. No, instead, they've created a military situation where, even though they're outnumbered, it shows you the kind of craziness of the European mindset. It's like, we are superior to you, and Pharaoh at this point knows, not really, no. But he had to go in command of that group because of the other guy in charge, played by David Thewlis, was corrupt. He was corrupt, and he gets shot by one of his own men. So Pharaoh has to take command and has to actually help defend against the indigenous population because as the situation gets worse. Pocahontas managed to bring them food at a certain point, but once they to survive, but the locals, indigenous population, think they're going to leave after the winter's over. When they realise they're planting crops that they're actually going to stay, that's when they realise, oh, this is an invasion. This is not a... Because Pharaoh's not going to tell them that no, we're staying. He knows that was going to cause trouble. He knows he basically has to build it in slowly after you got communication. Because the situation gets completely out of hand, battles begin. Pocahontas is thrown out of tribe for helping the whites, and all hell breaks loose. And then the story basically is what happens to everyone once the Europeans return, and it becomes obvious that the Europeans are here to stay. And what do the Indians do? What does Pocahontas do? What does John Smith do? And it's about the different psychologies and the different social structures, how they clash with each other, and how the Europeans just don't get that they have to tread carefully. They'll just steamroll through everything because they think that's their right, and they'll just destroy anything that's in their way. The Indians can fight, but they don't have the same weapons that the Europeans have, and the Europeans are now sending soldiers, and the indigenous population just don't have the manpower or the skills to fight them. So it's something they're going to have to learn over time, is there are ways to fight these people, but at the moment this is the first contact, they don't know how to do it. So the whole story, even though there's fighting, is really about the different motivations of the different characters and how that affects the situation, how the lies people tell to each other, how the evasions they have from each other, and how the kind of general psychology of a culture meeting another culture. If they're not incompatible, there's no one there to actually find a middle ground, which was impossible in this case. Like, the Europeans were not interested in a middle ground. They really weren't. They had a very patronising view of the indigenous people. They thought they were stupid, even though the Europeans almost starved to death because they weren't prepared. They still have that arrogance. So the film is impartially about that, especially in the longer cuts. The longer cuts, they go into more detail about the failures of Europeans and the failures of how these cultures are going to clash. And the theatrical cut is more about the atmosphere of the situation, how things develop, and the way people develop. In the longer cuts, you get a much more of a sense of the European psychology and how they're all trapped within their own mindset a lot more. Like it's they're in their own self-made prison. And like in the first cut, the central character is basically, for a lot of the time, is John Smith. And then it becomes Pocahontas as the film goes on. In the theatrical cut, it's hard to go from cut to cut in this thing. It always remains the Pocahontas story with John Smith as our chief supporting character. That's the biggest difference, and I think in the extended cut, it's about everybody has their say, really. That's the big difference, is it's like who the point of view character is. But for a lot of it in the first cut, it's the John Smith story for the first half of the film, but you're more with him than anyone else. You're more with his problems and how he has to deal with things, and how he's sort of like whipped from Thin Red Line in a way that he's got a kind of a nature that he can embrace other cultures and can embrace other ways of seeing things, and he is emotional, susceptible to actually experiencing things outside his control. But he's also got the killer nature of his ancestors and the kind of tactical nature of he's trained as a soldier, and those two things are fighting within him. And Colin Farrell's a really good casting choice for this part, because he excels in that kind of thing, that kind of mix of idealism versus practical that you get in Miami Vice not long after it, and he's done that a lot in his career. It's like something that he can really do well. And I think this is the first film where he had a few successes with Tigerland and Minority Report, and he did the big failure with Alexander. But this is when he started to establish a kind of a base for what he was strong at, and what he kind of like, what was a kind of Colin Farrell kind of character. Even though he could do other things, this was kind of like him developing a base, and this character was kind of important to solidify why he was good in certain kind of parts. Malick's very good with actors. He has a reputation of not being, but he actually is very good at casting actors and showing the strengths and what's the really strongest part of their personality. A lot of actors give their best performance for Malick. And this is one of the cases here where Colin Farrell is really interesting, because he is playing a guy who's split in the centre of his soul. He's just a split soul. And the longer cuts, you can see that more. And the shorter cuts, he's a bit more of a shadow character, in a sense of you're going through things with him, but certain things are kept back, so he becomes a mysterious character. So he's almost like what the indigenous population would see of someone saying, I don't quite get that character, I get the different aspects of him, I don't quite get what's driving him. In the longer cuts, you get more what's actually driving him, you go from the exterior to the interior, basically, this character. You always get what's driving Pocahontas. You always get a sense of this as someone who's naive and sees the best in the world, and has to, her story is basically learning the dangers of people. Really, that people can be dangerous, especially John Smith, who she falls in love with. And she doesn't realise that there's other sides to him that he even tells her, you should not trust me. Like, he tells her that he understands the stuff in him that's not nice. And he warns her, and she doesn't listen. And it's a case of someone learning to go through heartache and to live again. And that can be very sappy. That's the kind of cliche of many romantic fiction. But here it's done clearly. Like, it's done with intelligence, and it's the sense of why does that emotional story, why does it go over generations, and it's something that's very powerful for a lot of women. And this is let's look at the intelligent way of looking at this story and why it actually is such a powerful message, a powerful story device for lots of people. And the idea is, it's just the idea of someone having to learn to readjust the soul and learn to go through loss and return to society as a person who's gone through it and actually can still be useful to people and be helpful and be kind. And that's again, it's another one where in the theatrical cut, little bits are lost of the journey in the middle, but you do get a sense in the theatrical cut, the sense of the wonder of the world and try to figure out the kind of craziness of the world. That's what comes through in the theatrical cut. In the extended versions, you get a bit more detail about the person, really, is a big takeaway, really. I mean, the other characters, Christopher Plummer does turn up throughout the film as the guy, the leader of the expedition. He did not have a good time in this film, even though he's terrific in it. He did not like Malick's style of directing. Well, if you look at the extras in New World, Farrell and the actors playing Pocahontas just went with it, and they were cool with whatever he was doing. Just, it depends, a certain actor who just doesn't respond to that. Other actors do, so it's like, you see that all the time. Just certain people, other people, the way of working just clashes, and it's never going to work. Christian Bale turns up, and he would turn up in other Malick films later. He plays the man who kind of brings Pocahontas back to society. And he's a man who's also dealt with loss. I mean, this was kind of like, he kind of has the most boring part in the film, but he makes it work because he invests in it. It's like a thing where, yeah, this could be a stock character, but Bale actually invests in the character and understands that his importance to the character is just to show decency. That's it. So he actually invests in that and actually really goes for it. So it actually really works. But it's probably one of the least complicated characters Bale's played. But that's fine because he understands where he is in the story. And there's other the indigenous characters played by Wes Studi and things like that. People you'd recognise from Last of the Mohicans, essentially, who also appear and disappear as the events change, and they go from being warriors in a tribe to basically being examples of a tribe being paraded around Europe and realising that their day is done, basically, that this is a whole new world. And it's like, there's a great sequence towards the end where they go to Britain and they're expecting something astonishing, and it turns out this is this petty, cold little island that created all this expansion, but in itself is nothing. And it's just like a wonderful sequence. But even there, the kind of indigenous population characters embrace finding new things about the world and finding what this new world is. Like Pocahontas, that's where she finally kind of heals completely. She managed to face off against John Smith finally, and both of them realise what they've gained and lost in life. And she starts to find peace with nature before she dies. So there's lots of wonderful stuff, all about the different cultures, all about the kind of drives around people and how it can affect things in ways that they cannot expect, and how no one can see the full picture of anything. It's just like it becomes much more random and based on decisions made by people, and everyone's out of control and no one's quite sure where they're going, and everyone's making mistakes, and how that shapes the world with all these flawed characters interacting. And that's not even looking at the Malichisms of the wonderful voiceover sequences, the wonderful use of colour and nature. I mean, this is a beautiful film to watch. The photography is stunning throughout. It's just like a absolutely genius film. When you're just looking at photography, or if you're just looking at some of the editing, how they create the atmosphere of each place, so that you're not in it for that long, but you get a sense of the entire world of the situation to understand who these people are. And Malick's good at having all these side characters who you don't get them very much, but you get a sense of who they are and what they mean to this world, and it gives you a real sense of the world, of what it is. Rather than having lots of exposition, he just does it with people talking, interacting, and you get a sense of the nature of these characters, whether it be from the indigenous people or the people trapped in the fort as everything's going wrong and they're starving to death and it's freezing cold and all of that kind of mania involved there. Malick's good at everything. He's good at showing you the British culture when they finally go back to Britain. He's good at the entire thing. He understands people and what they all are, and he's very good at defining them through very simple ways of showing a society without being simplistic about it. It's actually showing you like the essence of who they are, and you can actually expand out from that, rather than a lot of films it's simplistic and it's just basically a cliche and you don't want anything, you're just passing the time. And this one, I know you've done a lot from the culture just by how they interact with different people, and it's suggestive of other things going on you're never going to see. So The New World is wonderful. It's a stunning film. I highly recommend you go and see it. It's just one of the greats. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't want to go any longer. I'm just want to encourage you now to go and see it because it's wonderful. Any of the cuts are great, but if you've got the criterion, I would recommend the first cut because I think it's the strongest of all the cuts because it's got the strength of the theatrical, the atmosphere, and it's also got the depth of the extended without some of the bloat. So that's me for now. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back later with some more. Bye.